That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
The Pit Stop has made over 219 episodes covering RuPaul's Drag Race since its inception in season 8, where Kingsley became the first host and Detox became the very first guest. Yet there was always things I wondered, like which queen has guest the most amount of times on the Pit Stop, or who's the most successful host. Eventually, I started coming up with so many questions that I decided to do what I don't think anyone else has done yet, which was, given that I started my first office job, I had to learn how to use Excel. So I used my newfound skills to compile data from every single episode of the Pit Stop to have ever been uploaded to YouTube, jotting down the season and episode, the host, and the guest for a given week. With that, I want to take you into a fun deep dive into things you may not have known about the Pit Stop, but might actually change the way you view some areas of it moving forward. Although I do want to give a quick congratulations to all of you on getting my last video to over 5,000 likes. As promised, as a reward, you'll be getting a 40-minute deep dive on a popular queen next week. But before we start, if you're someone that's always wanted to build a website but felt overwhelmed, well, good news, because Squarespace is the sponsor of today's video that makes it ridiculously easy. Whether you're a creator, a small business owner, or just want a personal blog, their stunning templates and drag and drop tools let you create something professional without needing to know a single bit of coding. What's more is that something that might interest you is if your website will be selling products or services. That's where Squarespace Payments has your back. You can set up a shop in minutes and offer flexible payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Afterpay, so customers can check out however they want. Honestly, whether you're launching a brand or just need a sleek portfolio, Squarespace has everything you need to make it happen, with their design intelligence tool that will help guide you step by step to ultimately make a professional looking interface. Plus, you'll get custom curated content and visuals that match your brand's aesthetic effortlessly. Try for free by heading to squarespace.com and clicking the link in the description to save 10% off your first website or domain. Now, let's begin. To start off, we're going to be focusing on the guests. There has now been a total of 106 different people to guest on 220 episodes. Obviously, this means that some people got to come back a lot more times than others. So then, who would be the most reoccurring one? Well, in first place, we have Laganja Estranja, who's been a part of 9 episodes, with second place being shared by Delta Work, Katya, and Manila Luzon, who all have 7 episodes under their belt. This in itself was already pretty surprising to me, just based on the fact that I expected Katya to be in the lead by a lot, since she is, after all, a super popular guest among the viewers. But to see that it was actually Laganja Estranja by a long shot, and that Delta Work is actually pretty high up on the list, was pretty interesting to say the least. I mean, who would you have expected to been up there? Some more popular guests are the ones that have 5 episodes under their belt. It's important to note that queens like Mariah Balenciaga, Morgan McMichaels, and Raja have been invited since the inception of the series, being among the OG Pit Stop guests. Then there's the group of queens with 4 episodes under their belt, being Adore, Bianca, Bob, Ginger, Jada, and Peppermint. The group with 3 episodes under their belt that has Brooke, Detox, Eureka, Farrah, Gia, Jinx, Kimchi, Mohart, Naomi Smalls, Angina, Thorgy, and Trinity the Tuck. Those with just 2 episodes under their belt. And finally, the biggest group are the guests that only have been able to make 1 appearance. All that being said, Drag Race queens are not the only people to be invited. For instance, one of the more controversial type of episodes is when randomly they'll have a non-drag queen come to give their commentary, which has resulted in 7 C-list type celebrities to have gotten their own spotlight too. Most of the time, fans don't really like it when this happens because they feel random non-drag race celebrities don't really have the criteria to judge an episode given that they've never competed on Drag Race, or in some cases straight up finding them boring because it's the equivalent of a random fan being able to sit down next to the host. But out of these 7, there is one outlier, and that's Nicole Byer. Nicole is actually the only one of them to have been invited a second time, with her episodes being the most viewed by a long shot out of the C-list celebrities to be invited. Personally, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on non-Drag Race queens as guests, because it's become somewhat of a heated topic depending on who you bring it up to. So then, now that we've looked at guest data, we're gonna hop on over to data related to the actual host. Out of 18 seasons of the Pit Stop, there has only been 8 people selected to host it. If you had to guess right now, who do you think has hosted the most versus who's hosted the least amount of episodes? I'll give you 1 second to think about it. Well, if you guessed Trixie, then you were right, because she's at a shocking lead with 73 episodes hosted, having over 2 times the amount of the person in second place, which is Bob the Drag Queen having hosted 35 episodes. Surprisingly though, I always assumed Kingsley, who hosted the first season of the Pit Stop, would be in last place. But it's actually Alaska, who's only hosted 9 episodes of the Pit Stop. So then, where do we go from here? Well, at the time I compiled data for this video, season 17 is in the middle of airing. So Monet X Change has already hosted the first 5 episodes of the season. Those episodes have been included in the data you see displayed on screen. Subsequently, given that I can't update this video once I upload it, we can assume that by the time Monet completes her hosting of season 17, that she will surpass Bianca Del Rio in total episode count. Nevertheless, in many aspects, a host can sometimes make or break the engagement of the fans. So then, for a much heavier question, what are the most viewed seasons within the Pit Stop's history? Season 13 is currently the most watched Pit Stop season in terms of total number of views added up from all of its individual episodes. It sits at over 34,100,000 views and was hosted by Trixie Mattel. Now, it could be argued that a big reason why it's so ahead of all the other editions is because this aired in early 2021, at the height of the COVID-19 lockdown. So most people were stuck in their house all day. At the same time, the pandemic was an era where Drag Race really started to expand even more in terms of the amount of audience that was tuning in to see it. Although I will say that it's very surprising that season 13 still actively holds the title for most watched Pit Stop season, because to this day, years later, no season that's come after it, including All-Star seasons, has gotten close to its amount of views. But hey, maybe season 17 or All-Stars 10 will prove me wrong. The next 2 most watched Pit Stop seasons are actually season 15 with over 26 million views and season 14 with over 25 million. Additionally, in 4th place, we have All-Stars 7, the first all-winner season, as the most watched Pit Stop from the All-Stars franchise. Funny enough, the top 4 of this list each has a different host, with Trixie in 1st, Bianca in 2nd, Monet in 3rd, and Bob in 4th. On the other hand, at the bottom of the list is season 8, hosted by Kingsley, which is fair given that it was the pilot edition. But if you notice, you'll see that Raja is one of the less successful hosts, with all of her seasons being towards the lowest rated edition. So it becomes clear that just because you have a good host doesn't mean that it'll directly translate to a good turnout in viewership. Which brings us to our next question, which is that what makes an episode of the Pit Stop successful? For that, we have to look at the most clicked on episodes ever. Out of the top 10 most viewed Pit Stop episodes, Trixie Mattel was the host for 7 of them. In fact, she takes all the spots within the top 3, with 2 season 13 episodes and 1 All-Star 6 episode. At over 5,600,000 views, season 13 episode 5 sits as the most watched. Then there's season 13 episode 1 being over 5 million, and All-Star 6 episode 1 at over 4 million. These are pretty big numbers that they haven't been able to match in years, with now the average successful episode of the Pit Stop hovering at just under 3 million views. Yet another part of what makes an episode trend more than others tends to be the guest that will be invited on a given week. For example, the very first Pit Stop episode to ever garner over 1 million views was All-Stars 2 episode 6, where Trixie Mattel was the guest. This is pretty significant because up until then, and even for a while afterwards, the viewership averaged between 200,000 and 500,000 at most. Keep in mind that All-Stars 2 aired towards the end of 2016, just a year and a half after Trixie's debut on season 7, proving early on that anything her name was attached to would be pretty successful. What's even funnier is that the next episode of the Pit Stop to get over 1 million views would happen in season 9, when Katya made her first guest appearance. What's more is that within season 9, the only other episodes besides Katya to garner over 1 million views were the ones with Bob, Violet Chachki, and Raven. The reason I point this out is because you'd think with their first edition to get 4 episodes with over 1 million views, that their next Pit Stops would somewhat match their level of success. Surprisingly though, that's far from the truth. All-Stars 3 and season 10 were the next 2 editions of the Pit Stop after season 9. But noticeably, none of their episodes episodes were able to even come close to surpassing 1 million views. In fact, most of them averaged less than 500,000. So while it was clear that the show was getting to be well known, given that there was a precedent of a good portion of the fanbase having tuned in to their previous installments, there was something that just wasn't clicking during this point to make it turn into the mega platform that it is right now. So then, what changed? Well, you know how I told you Trixie was the first guest to have an episode earn over 1 million views? Well, that wouldn't be the last time she helped provide exposure for them. All Stars 4 was the first season that Trixie Mattel was selected to host her own season. It was also the first time that each episode averaged at least 700,000 viewers tuning in every week, 4 of which reached over 1 million, along with the first episode to cross over the 2 million viewer threshold, which maybe could be attributed to the fact that Katya was the guest for this one, making it the most watched episode up until that point. At the time, All Stars 4 was the most viewed pit stop season at over 11 million views, more than doubling season 10's views, who was the season right before it, that only garnered just over 5 million views. It's here that it became super clear that in order to have a successful after show, they would need to A, get a host that was a fan favorite, and B, make a selection of guests that would have a great chemistry sitting down next to them. I mean, the proof lies in the fact that right after Trixie's groundbreaking hosting of All Stars 4, season 11, which was the one to follow it up, hosted by Manila Luzon, would not be able to beat it, sitting at 9 million total views, making it just 2 million views under All Stars 4, which mind you had less episodes than them. So then, if at this point the pit stop was in fact becoming more popular, but was still fluctuating between viral episodes and those that weren't as successful, at what point does it start to become clear that it was now a dominant platform for the franchise as a whole? Well, something that became clear to me the more I analyzed the data I gathered was that Trixie Mattel really is the queen of the pit stop. Look, I know a lot of you might disagree with me, since even I personally considered Bob the Drag Queen my favorite host for the pit stop, but considering all of the data I've provided you so far in relation to Trixie, she once again breaks a new record, when for season 13, it became the first edition of the pit stop where every single episode averaged at least over 1 million views each. A record that Bob the Drag Queen came close to achieving with All Stars 5, but failed with the finale episode not making it past the million. Nevertheless, season 13 went on to become the highest rated pit stop ever, really cementing itself into the culture of the fanbase. I mean, at this point, even if you were a new fan of the series, it'd be really difficult for it not to be recommended on your YouTube feed at some point or another. I mean, I can assure you that there is a good portion of people that only started watching RuPaul's Drag Race because they became Trixie fans first, saw that she was hosting the pit stop, and just decided to tune in since, hey, it's Trixie. Anyways, from this point forward, the new normal was that each pit stop episode would for sure be getting 1 million views each, most of them now getting close or surpassing 2 million views. In fact, the only times a pit stop episode got less than 1 million views from this point forward was All Stars 8 episode 7, where Peppermint was the guest, All Stars 8 episode 10, where Denali was the guest, and All Stars 9 episode 9, where Jan was the guest. It's important to note that for this video, I am not counting any of the season 17 episodes, since they did just get released, so the views haven't yet settled. Plus, I know that a lot of people like to binge it after the airing of the actual main show. Although, speaking of guests, when we look at the top 27 most viewed episodes out of a 220 episode total, which are the only existing episodes to have at least 2 million views or more, an important component to focus on within this set of data, given that it's their most viral episodes, is how many times certain guests appear. Katya is in 4 out of the top 27. Violet and Bob the Drag Queen were in 3 out of those 27, with Bianca and Ben de la Creme having been guests in 2 out of those top 27. In terms of who hosted the episodes that made it to the top 27 of the list, Trixie hosted 11 of them, Bob hosted 6, with Bianca and Monet X Change tying each at just 5. It's important to note that this top 27 most viral episodes is out of a list of over 220 episodes, which really shows that these guests didn't just make it to the top of the list by fluke. Along with that, we have to also explore whether certain mixes of guest and host prompt there to be a more successful turnout. If you had to guess what pairing of host and guest based on viewership is the most acclaimed by fans, who would you say? Well, originally my guess was that it would be Bob the Drag Queen and someone else. Yet the 3 best pairings based on the top 27 most viewed episodes is Trixie and Katya, Trixie and Bob the Drag Queen, and Trixie and Violet Chachki. But only one of them takes the cake, so I'll give you 1 second to form your own guess. Now, I know this will come as a shock to some of you, but Violet Chachki and Trixie is the most successful pairing, surpassing Trixie and Katya only by a mere 200,000 views. Trust me, I was also assuming the dynamic duo of having Katya and Trixie together would be the one that reigned supreme, but I think that by this data, people might be a little more excited when it comes to seeing Violet's personality contrast Trixie's, especially since it's a super serious fashion queen talking to a clown. Some other pairings that are worth mentioning but do not appear more than once within the top 27 episodes is Bob the Drag Queen and Katya with over 3,500,000 views, Bianca with Bendela Creme and Jinx that were the first 2-person guests on the pit stop that would only be followed by Sugar and Spice a couple months later, and of course Trixie and Maddie Morphosis, that is the most viral episode of season 16's pit stop, along with Maddie having been one of the more hyped guests from the fans. In terms of overall data for the pit stop, I think I've compiled the most relevant information we can find and built a pretty decent story around it to help us understand and have more of an enjoyment absorbing all of it. I think this data will be relevant for a while since it covers 9 years worth of data, but I want to hear about you guys first before I share it. Is there anything you were curious about that you'd like me to find out for you? Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to click the link in the description to get 10% off your first website or domain. I want to take a moment to thank my 2025 patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Saritish, Natasha De Leon, Las Pothitas, Cool Gal Nan, and our newest Pink Squad member, please welcome Jetzam Adams. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, or Diesel Placer, depending on the time or day you catch him, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch, but a Keek, Jack Beck, Bashir with the good beard, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Max Whale, Olivia Marr, and of course, Dea. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description, and I appreciate your support. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter, check out my other videos, and I'll see you guys next time.